All right. Looks like we are at the top of the hour. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Kris.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Good day. I'm excited about this topic.
Yeah, me too. Welcome to everybody who has joined us. This is our Overcoming Channel Conflict for B2B manufacturers. It's a webinar today, and we're really going to talk about how e-commerce and Amazon can work together with traditional channels. So grateful that you guys are here with us today. Just a few little notes before we get started. We would really love you to feel like this is a discussion. So if you have some questions for us and you don't want to miss getting those asked today, you guys are the ones who showed up. We want to make sure we're answering your questions today. So put those questions into the chat area. We're going to be monitoring that chat and we'll try to get to those throughout the presentation. We have planned to reserve some time at the end for questions. So certainly if there's time, we'll get any of your final questions in at that time as well. Also, this is being recorded. So please note that anybody who registered, they're going to get a copy of this recording. So feel free to sit back, relax, ask your questions, and just take in the information. But before I turn it over to Brian, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. I am Kris Harrington. I am the CEO of Gen Alpha Technologies, and Gen Alpha is a digital service provider for manufacturing companies. We predominantly work with equipment manufacturers, so OEMs. We work with parts, component, and service organizations as well. And something that's really critical to know about us is that 80% of the current manufacturing customers we work with today do use our platform to support their distribution channel, so their dealer network, the shops, the rental units. So this is a topic that is near and dear to us and also to the clients that we serve. So we are really excited to share our experience with you today. Brian, turn it over to you.
Awesome. Kris, thank you so much. I'm excited to be tackling this topic with you today. And we're partners with Gen Alpha, my firm in SEBA. And similar to you, we service and focus on B2B manufacturers, companies that make products, and that's the basis of how they differentiate in the market. In SEBA, we focus on helping B2B firms, brands, and manufacturers with their Amazon strategy and then executing their Amazon strategy. And if we talk about, and we'll show you some data later about what can become the number one source of channel conflict for many manufacturers, it is actually Amazon. My background is as an operator. I spent 20 plus years working on and leading e-commerce for companies like Harbor Freight Tools and others. I'm the author of a book called $1 Billion B2B e-commerce. You can see that here. I have a whole chapter about this, about Amazon, and another whole chapter about aligning channels. So there's lots of stuff in there for you to take a look at. I'm also the co-founder of a thought leadership series called Master B2B. We run physical and virtual events and really are a community of practitioners for B2B e-commerce and digital transformation. So Kris, I'm so excited to be doing this topic with you today. And I'm looking actually at some of the folks that are coming in here. I see Adam from Buy Right Beauty. Hey, Adam, good to see you again.
Hey, Adam.
Yep. Jamie's here from ResMed. We've got, Land O'Lakes is here. Master Lock is here. Owens Corning, Ansel, ABB, Ron from Dynabraid. We've got a whole bunch of folks from Henkel. Guys, thank you for joining us. You guys are all really, as I'm looking at the list of folks joining us today, these are topics that I think you all are obviously interested in, but also probably trying to figure out how do you approach these channels. So let's go ahead and get right into it, Kris. I'll get us started today. And again, let's make it a conversation, folks. Chime in, ask questions. We want to make this interactive. And Kris and I will be going back and forth a little bit too as we go through this. So let's start with who the B2B buyer is today. And one of the key things we have to recognize as an industry, as manufacturers, is that the buyer has changed and evolved. And in fact, today is a different person in many ways. Millennials, in fact, will be 75% of the global workforce, and they're increasingly moving into B2B product procurement roles. And these folks make over 60% of their purchases online, That's up from just 47% in 2017. And crazy stats here. And 2/3 of millennials make half or more of their purchases, guess where? From Amazon. Kris, it's funny. And when I do these things, I used to go and I'd speak in front of a room and say, how many people are, Amazon Prime members? And I get, half of the room raise their hand.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask the opposite question, right? How many are not? And you get like one person raises their hand and everyone like looks at them funny. So, it's really become a default. Are you an Amazon Prime member, Kris?
I absolutely am for many years now. So yes, my wife always laughs and says, I just love that Amazon has the reorder button. And I'm like,
Yeah. It's kind of scary, right?
Yes.
Yes, my Amazon bill is similar. And what's fascinating is that millennials use Amazon for 97% of at least part of their online shopping. So these buyers are silently and quickly becoming the majority of B2B buyers and of your customers. And this is happening, without a lot of companies realizing it. Then we had the pandemic hit, right? And B2B customers are now actively avoiding traditional channels. In fact, the scariest statistic is that 74% of millennials and Zoomers will avoid traditional sales channels or sales calls and outreach efforts. This is a study that was done last year by Activate Marketing Services. Mm-hmm. So, Kris, if we think about how many of these companies on the line today do business, right? This is how they've traditionally done business.
That is, yeah.
So this is changing, and it's creating opportunities for new channels. And I'm going to talk a lot about Amazon today. Kris is going to talk about e-commerce. But here's the state of what's happening. Almost 70% of product searches are now starting on Amazon. Almost 40% of online business buyers are finishing transactions on Amazon. 80% of business buyers have made at least one work purchase on Amazon. More than $40 billion in B2B sales in year 5, and it's still growing. This is the dirty secret. You all read the news about Amazon laying people off, and Amazon, retail is plateaued, their growth. Guess what? Amazon business, I'll show you data later, is still growing at a very significant double-digit rate. And it's become the fastest growing part of Amazon. They've integrated to procurement systems. They're winning government contracts. They're hiring from industry. So folks, don't be deceived by the news. Amazon is a significant player in B2B, and it's continuing to grow and invest here. And what's happened with these buyers, the fact that the buyer has changed has fueled this growth in B2B channels for Amazon. One other thing that's happening in the market is that loyalty is being challenged in all new ways. As we went through the pandemic, loyalty has shifted. 65% of customers will buy from a brand they've never heard of on Amazon. Mm-hmm. Say that again, 65%, folks, right? So think about your traditional loyalty. I talk to a lot of B2B companies. Kris, you probably do too every day. And, these folks are, they say, well, my business is about loyalty and my sales team and, these relationships. Yes, we're not here to say that that's not valid anymore. But what we are here to say is that loyalty has changed. And in fact, this new generation of buyers has shifted more of their loyalty to channel in a lot of ways versus to brands. So this creates both opportunity for you, and it creates a competitive challenge. Because as you look at where people are selling product, you have companies coming into e-commerce channels like Amazon and building product just for those channels, and they're better than most traditional manufacturers are at those channels. They're taking market share from you, and you probably don't even know it. So there's a whole swath of folks that are coming into the market. This also creates opportunity for you to capture market share, because guess what? These best practices in e-commerce and Amazon, they're not secrets. We're here to help you do this stuff, and you can apply these things to your business. The issue is just getting started with a lot of them. So that's go ahead, Kris. Do you have something to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we talk so much about that new generational buyer, and certainly that has created the shift. But, I think about myself. I'm a Gen X. I've been, I'm not your traditional millennial or Gen Z, but certainly, when I'm looking for something, particularly when it's like a do-it-yourself type job where I don't want to go get some service and support for something, I'm going to search on Amazon. I'm guilty of that. I like to look at the different options. I like to look at the reviews. I want to take the recommendation on what is the Amazon Prime. So I think, this is so much more than that next generation. I think if we just look at ourselves and our own behaviors, we're going to realize that this is happening beyond just that. They've certainly driven the change, and they're the biggest change, but it just doesn't stop there.
No, absolutely not. And we'll share a couple of best practices with everyone here and some things that you can put into your practice in your business in a few minutes. I call this, Kris, in my book, I call it the age of commerce transparency for B2B, because what's happening is the buyer has more power than they ever have, more choice. And I'll get into that a little later. But I think this fellow here, and Kris, you know who this is? Who's this guy?
Yes, I do.
Probably the most famous e-commerce person in the world, Mr. Jeff Bezos. Who founded Amazon. He's no longer the CEO, as many of you know, but he's still quite involved. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back at some point to run it again. But he said this back about 10 years ago, and this is so true. I'm going to read this quote. "The balance of power is shifting towards buyers and away from companies. The right way to respond to this, if you are a company, all of you, is to put the vast majority of your energy, attention, and dollars into building a great product." That's what you all do, right? Or service, and put a smaller amount into shouting about it or marketing it, right? So what he's saying here is, the differentiation today is product. And if you are building a great product, these shifts and changes are really just about customer channel preference changes. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but I thought he summarized it pretty well, Kris, in terms of how, this overall dynamic that's occurring.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you're a manufacturer, where does this leave you? Does it leave you without fingernails like this guy? And Kris, I know you and I have talked about this so many times. Same kind of dynamic where, you're saying, gosh, how do I deal with all this? I've got 90% of my revenue with channel, right? I've got distribution, I've got dealers, I've got retailers, or whoever you're selling to. And that's where all my my revenue is where all my profit is. My sales team is telling me, don't launch e-commerce because it's going to compete, or, how can you sell on Amazon or whatever? So what do you do, right? Many of you on the call today, I know, because I know a bunch of you are dealing with this. And so, at the end of the day, does all this mean you can't launch e-commerce and also empower your dealers and distributors at the same time? And even how do you even define e-commerce, right? And so, Kris, I know you have a perspective on this.
Yeah, such great questions, I think, to answer, and talk about right here in the beginning, because my belief absolutely is that you launch e-commerce to empower everybody on that customer facing side. If we think about our back-end systems, we've got the ERP system, we have our CRM system, we have our CAD systems. That's what we use internally. But in this world of customers and buyers have more opportunity than ever, and they are in control, we've got to get the information in their hands where they're looking for it. So certainly, if your customer today is your distribution channel, then we need to empower them to be able to respond to customers quickly. So that might be your first starting point. And I love to, define e-commerce as a digital self-service channel, right? It's the channel that's moving you away from traditional phone calls, emails, text messages, sometimes even away from that in-person communication, and making product information available 24/7, 365, at people's fingertips right here where they want it. So that's critical. And I always say that the goal of this process is to ease the process of doing business with you. So that should be the goal. Make your dealer's job easier, make your customer's job easier, make that shop's job easier, and think about e-commerce as more than just a place to transact. It's not just about a purchase. It is about transparency of data. You just mentioned that, Brian. So transparency of when is my product coming, getting that tracking information, downloading invoices, maybe getting work instructions on how to disassemble or reassemble a piece of equipment, again, so that customers or dealers don't have to be lost at where do they go, or how many different tools do they have to use with you, or do they go to YouTube and Google search on YouTube so that they can find a video to perform the work on your unit. No, give them the tools. And that's really what digital self-service is all about. So that's the way that I like to define it. It's really, think about it as operational efficiency. It's better dealer and customer engagement. It's new revenue streams, right? And we're going to talk about that today. And it's greater business agility. So as the times change, and maybe you start with a digital commerce site just for your dealer network. And again, we'll talk about this, but later, due to competition and other things, you might have to turn on public access. You need to be ready for that, and you need to have the solution. So that agility is really key. So that's how I would define it.
I also, Kris, great way to think about it and define it. The other thing that I'll suggest here is that it's not. It's not the death of a salesperson, right? And we'll talk more about channel alignment. And again, I have a chapter in my book about that. But your sales team, when you're doing this right, is empowered by all these digital channels. And manufacturers often are most frightened of that, right? It's there's this sort of notion that our sales team is the whole relationship is going to be gone. So let's talk though about defining where this all comes from. I think it's helpful for everyone to understand from what we see. Managing channel to Cody, thanks for your question. I'm gonna get to that. We actually have a section on Amazon. I'm going to talk about that. So hold the question. I see it here. So we'll get your answer there. Let me start by defining this. And I love to use the authority on everything, Wikipedia, but I think they actually define this pretty well. Channel conflict occurs when a manufacturer, you all, disintermediate your channel partners, such as distributors, dealers, retailers, sales reps, by selling your products directly to buyers. Note, buyers doesn't necessarily mean consumers. Doesn't necessarily mean your B2B buyer at the end of the chain. Some of the folks on the call today, if you're selling to an HVAC contractor or, someone like that, or Schneider's here too, if you're selling to an electrical contractor, it doesn't, buyer is a general term. It's a B2B buyer, B2C buyer. It could be your dealer or distributor or retailer as well. And this says by selling your products directly to buyers through general marketing methods or over the internet. So you're a manufacturer. Look at all this margin you have. You can sell and you can undercut your channels and all the rest and take away the relationship they have, right? This is kind of the classic definition of channel conflict. And how has the world changed? And I like to frame it up this way, Kris, where I stole this from my master B2B business partner, Andy Hoare. He did this. He displayed this when he was at Forrester Research. And this is the way the world, was, right? Simple. It was simple. There were still multiple channels, but it was simpler, where you had a branded manufacturer like Dry-Ease, which makes these industrial humidifiers, that would sell to a distributor like Grainger, McMaster Carr, or Fastenal, right? Traditional distribution. And ultimately, ServiceMaster, which is a service company using these industrial humidifiers in industrial applications, would actually buy the product from a Grainger and use it in delivering their services. So that's the ultimate buyer. And we started to see some branded manufacturers selling a bit directly to the end buyer. But ultimately, the world was simple. Everyone knew their role, and the days. So the world has changed, right, Kris? You see this too. The ultimate buyer is in charge, guys. This is the reality, right? Sam, good question. We'll get to that one too. Amazon and eBay. Thank you. But this is how the world has changed, today. So you have that same branded manufacturer making the product, Dry-Ease. Now you have other producers competing with them through these e-commerce channels. I'll get to that in a second. You still have distribution, but a lot of them have evolved. Many of them, not all of them, have evolved to be multi-channel distribution. So Grainger, Fastenal, McMaster Carr have very sophisticated e-commerce, channels in addition to their traditional distribution and selling methods. You have e-commerce pure plays like DrillSpot and Zorro and Global Industrial. And then you have marketplaces like Amazon Business, pure play vertical marketplaces. They exist in building products and chemicals and metals in all kinds of different B2B categories. And now you still have the ultimate buyer at the bottom here, and you've got branded manufacturers selling direct. And now branded manufacturers are introducing private label. They're buying their suppliers. Oh my goodness, the world has gone crazy. Dogs and cats living together. It's insane. To quote Ghostbusters, the ultimate buyer user has power, right, Kris? I mean, they have more power, more choice, more transparency to price. It is the age of transparency, right?
It is. You got it.
So what is this all centered on? So you're thinking about this and you're at the top of this food chain here and you're going, my goodness, what do I do about all this? We'll get to that. What is it really about, right? Is it about price? Is channel conflict about price? And I wish we should have done some polls in here. But price is certainly an element of it, right? And certainly the ability as a manufacturer to undercut your channel. But at the end of the day, Kris, I don't know if you find the same thing, but with a lot of our clients, we find that price, actually, we take it out of the equation, because when we go to sell, if we're selling direct, either on Amazon or directly through e-com, we're setting it at an MSRP or a MAP price, and we can take this out of the equation. So what is it really about? I think that in my experience, it's really about the relationship between the buyer and the seller, both internal and external. I see channel conflict the way we define it. It's both the internal sales team relationship with the end buyer, as well as the relationship that your distributor or dealer has with that end buyer. And it's about the threat of disintermediation of that specific relationship. But it doesn't have to be that way. In other words, if you're confronting the reality, there's discomfort in all of this, but at the end of the day, that's a good sign. And by confronting that ultimate buyer and the reality of the power that they have today, you can actually position yourself for long-term success and still maintain healthy relationships and still empower your channels. And Kris is going to get into that in a minute, because it's not about surrendering and ignoring this. Too often when I'm talking to manufacturers, they're saying, my goodness, I don't know what to do. I'm just kind of, la. I'm not hearing that, Amazon is 70% of product search and my customers demand e-commerce and they're buying from new channels and all the rest. It's not about surrendering. It's about confronting the reality of what's going on here. And so, Kris, why don't you take us through some e-commerce best practices around overcoming this channel conflict?
Yeah, I love it when you say, let's confront the reality, because I think that's where we're going in this next section, is we really just need to think about what is and what steps we can start taking today, because with all this data we're seeing, we can't stand still. So let's start by talking about the B2B buyer journey. And, according to Gartner, B2B buyers spend only 17% of the total purchase journey with sales reps, 17%. And 44% of millennials prefer no sales rep interaction at all in a B2B setting. So, come on, this is different. If we think about who your buyers are, they're basically telling you that they want digital options. And, that's what this is about. So, if we look at this B2B buyer journey, which is something that has existed for a very long time, it's just that in a traditional method, your customers would either reach out to your dealers to get support, or dealers would come to you for support, and you'd have a salesperson show up on site. With that awareness, consideration, decision-making, purchase and post-purchase process, everybody wants an opportunity to do something with you online. So we have to overcome channel conflict. So if everything Brian said is true and my stats are true, we've got to overcome this. And I will tell you that if we look at Gen Alpha's manufacturing clients and we look at year-over-year growth, we had 27% growth in revenue online year over year, and then 15% growth in visits to all of our implementations. So again, Brian's got the data, I've got data sitting here, and then we have the true implementations with our manufacturing clients that say people are using these tools. So we've got to overcome the conflict, and we've got to move into delivery. So on this slide, I really just want to talk about, so Brian shares the number one area is Amazon. Amazon can be a huge channel conflict. But when we look directly inside manufacturing organizations, there are two areas that continue to pop up over and over again when it comes to that channel conflict that can prevent people from getting started. And it starts with your inside and outside sales reps. So this group, like all of us, change is hard. So when you move away from your traditional methods and you move online where you're offering information online, that's going to be change. So we're going to have to walk people through change. But what makes this a little different is that these people will sometimes perceive online solutions to displace their role in the company. And that's why you get conflict in this area. And if we don't handle this properly, you can have pushback. So this is one area that's really key. The second area here is from, your direct dealers and distributors, which we're spending a lot of time talking about here today. So, traditionally, your dealers are the face to the customer. So they have supported them, and any perception that a manufacturer is building a relationship with the end customer starts to feel like a threat to them, because they've always owned that customer relationship. Manufacturer sold to the dealer, dealer sold to the customer. Dealer has a lot of power when they have that end user information. If they think you as the manufacturer are going to now have that information, that's where the threat comes into play. So that's one piece of that. But then also, if we look at our, the owners of these middle market companies, and we look at the executives teams, they've built their businesses and they've built their careers on these partnerships with these dealers and distributors. So they also perceive that dealer-distributor relationship as something that they don't want to disturb. They don't want to rock the boat, right? So what we found is that the perceived threat from these two areas is what often cripples teams and prevents them from ever getting started with a digital commerce solution. And I'm telling you, we have to overcome that. For all the reasons we've already been discussing, we've got to get past these two. So, I would encourage you to have caution and care when you build your strategy to overcome these two areas. So let's talk a little bit now about the causes of channel conflict. And I think, these might be obvious to some of us, but I think it's important to talk about. And again, if you have questions in this area, if you're on the call today and you're getting resistance internally, this session is meant to be for you. So let's go deeper into something if you need it. But certainly, this starts with poor communication. So if you poorly communicate, you lock two people in a room and you've told them we're going to move towards e-commerce, and they go find a vendor and they come up with the requirements and they launch, and not many people have been communicated, there's going to be some friction when you get going. So that's a big area for channel conflict. And that leads to resistance to change. If people don't understand what it means to them, if your own team members, like we just talked about, don't understand, your customer team members, your internal customer support team members, your sales team calling on dealers or customers, they're going to resist change if they don't have the right communication. There are going to be conflicts over, and that's the next one here, conflicts over margins and profits potentially if manufacturers sell direct and they don't set up good policies related to that. So that's a potential area for conflict. Also, if there are unclear sales and marketing strategies, this is going to be confusing for people. So this is where certainly conflict can occur. Also, if we have same products sold into overlapping territories, you're going to cause channel conflict in that scenario, right? So we have to think about all the areas as we're building out our strategy. These are the areas where channel conflict will come up. Inconsistent pricing. So, Brian, you mentioned earlier how we make sure we have map pricing, or we have list price, or we have different types of pricing. But if we don't take care of those things, they certainly can be, they can cause channel conflict if they're not well understood. And then when the goals and objectives of the manufacturer and their dealer partners are not aligned, it can certainly cause channel conflict. So, here's a pretty stern warning from John Chambers at Cisco Systems, and he says, at least 40% of all businesses will die in the next 10 years if they don't figure out how to change their entire company to accommodate new technologies. What do you think, Brian?
I think that's pretty dire, and I think it's accurate too, though. I think we've got to confront the reality, and all those things you listed on the last slide here, Kris. I mean, they're right on point. I have a whole chapter on it in my book because they're, and frankly, I have some case studies in there too. Talk about how companies, when they actually, when they do that alignment you're talking about, get people involved, like the sales team early, they are the most successful at rolling this out. Aligning and communication is fundamental. So that's a great point you made there.
Yeah. So, and here are really the strategies for overcoming the conflict. So, with that quote, we don't want anybody not to be here in 10 years. This is really about making sure that we are all relevant and everybody's going to prosper as we go here. So how do you overcome these conflicts? Well, the first place to start is you've got to have executive buy-in and commitment from the top. We hear this over and over. Brian and I have participated in a lot of different panel discussions. We've talked to a lot of companies. We've seen this where companies try to move forward without commitment from the top. And then we've seen the difference when you have clear commitment from the top. But I will tell you that if you're going to create any fear or threat inside your distribution channel or in your rental houses or with your own salespeople, these are the core people to your leadership team. They bend for these people. That is the team that they support because it's what creates new business and new business opportunities. So you've got to get buy-in from the top. This is really, really critical to be successful. Once you have buy-in from the top, then you can define your strategy. And this is really when you get into the scope of what is going to be your digital commerce strategy. Now, I like to warn people here that you don't have to do everything all at once. When we work with manufacturers, it's typically a phased approach, and I'm going to talk about some of those phased options in a minute here. And that really leads us to work with and not against. So what do I mean by that? What I'm really talking about here is being transparent, being transparent with the strategy that you've set. Help everybody in the organization and your dealer partners, any of your selling partners, make them aware of what your strategy is and how they fit into it and how you're all delivering increased value to the end user, which ultimately will lead to everyone prospering in that chain. I don't think dealers go away. I don't think salespeople go away, but you have to communicate that to them. You have to communicate it early, often, and get them involved. Involve your sales teams, cross-functional teams, and dealer partners in your solutioning and testing so that they're giving you the feedback so that there's really good adoption on the other end, which will include training. If you put a robust solution out there, you don't want your partners and sales team members to just go out there and randomly figure it out for themselves. The reality is most of these sites are very intuitive. But even with the intuitive nature of them, there are usually features that people just aren't aware of, or maybe they've never even used them anywhere before, so they're not thinking to look for them. This is where your salespeople can be really valuable as they step out and get dealers to start using these tools, as they start using these tools themselves to be more successful. And then we have to reward. It's really critical to have success. You will risk adoption if you don't reward appropriately. And, when I talk about rewards, I'm talking about making sure that sales team, our team members are still commissioned for orders that come through the website and orders that don't come through the website, that come through maybe some of those traditional channels. So making sure they're compensated properly. This also can be true if you open up a website that is open to end customers, and you're allowing customers, anonymous customers, to place orders with you because maybe you have some gap areas in your dealer support structure. You could reward your dealers for orders that come online into their territory, and that will make them much more supportive of the process as well. So we need to think about all those. Go ahead, Brian.
That's interesting, Kris. There's a question from Tracy, and thank you. That's actually is to that point. She's interested in understanding the margin share scenarios when companies are using, when companies that are selling directly to dealers is also selling direct to consumer. So how do you can balance that? I think you just said it, right? You can commission or give credit even to dealers when you're selling directly to that end buyer. What I've seen Tracy and companies do is actually pass, like say, for example, you're selling a piece of equipment or something that needs servicing, installation, or post-sale support, or accessories or parts, passing that information to the dealer when that's sold directly through the manufacturer's website, and then allowing the dealer to do some follow-up with that customer. There's ways to pass this off and work together with the dealer. And this is true of Amazon too, by the way, and I'll get into that later.
Yeah, nope, that's exactly how I would have answered it as well. You put as that anonymous guest comes out and maybe shopping on the website for the parts, components that they need, they see list price, the website takes the order, but that information is then passed to the dealer, so the dealer can do the follow-up, the dealer gets commission, so everybody has their value in that chain. So let's talk through, when we talk about overcoming conflict, there are a lot of ways that vendors can support you in, these phased approaches to ways you might start with digital commerce. Okay. So, something that we see quite often with our equipment manufacturers is that they will first start with either a dealer portal or a customer portal. So their belief is that they don't need to have their store open to the public. There's no reason the public isn't actively buying their type of equipment that needs to potentially be supported. So it's not everybody that's seeking that type of either piece of equipment or the parts and service that go with it. So what they'll do is they'll put everything behind a secure login. They'll integrate that site to their ERP system so that, all of that customer master data is there, all the pricing for those customers and dealers, they can log in, they can identify the right components and parts that they might need, they can check out, and they can even order on account. So that's one option that will move you in the direction of selling your products online. And it's a pretty big move because it gets you there, right? It takes all that product information that's been in your ERP system, and now it gets it in the hands of customers. So that's a really good first one. The second one, and we have a lot of our customers as well choosing this one, which is limited information available to guests. So in this case, maybe you have, equipmentparts.com. Users are coming out to that site. They can search, they can find product information, they can look for work instructions, they can watch videos, they can see the product that they need. but maybe they have to go to the dealer still to actually place the order. So these are options where you're still giving that end user information to assist in doing their job. Now the dealer or or your registered customer can still log in. And when they log in, they're going to get all of their personalization and everything. They're going to get their pricing. But now you've given some information to guests, and then, you have your dealers who can place their orders. And then finally here, and this is only 20% of our market today. So we see this starting to shift, but it's a lot slower. And this is where a website will be open to guests. They have the full opportunity to purchase. And this is where we were just answering that question. So guests will purchase at an MSRP price or a list price. They can check out with a credit card, and then either a credit is given back to the dealer in the territory. And dealers who still own relationships, they can log in and get all of their information. So we're going to talk through some case studies here at the end, but I don't want to leave you here without sharing some of the important elements for success when selling online. And I have a quote here from Nielsen Group. When users visit a website, they only wait 10 to 20 seconds to decide if they'll stay on or not. So, we all know we've become impatient when it comes to, and then Brian, I think you've got
Hey,
something.
Kris, I have a really funny one here real quickly, if I could interject. In my book, I found this study as I was writing this. This is, our attention span as humans has gone to zero. There's a study that was done by the US government. I don't know why they did it, but they measured the attention span of a human against a goldfish. And it turns out that the goldfish has a longer attention span than the human. I don't know how they measure the attention span of a goldfish, but to your point, I mean, we're in an era when you have to be relevant immediately to people in this kind of a scenario. So for sure, I see that.
Yeah. So, when you make the move to selling online, here are some things I want you to be thinking about. You need to make sure that your pages are loading quickly, and we have a rule of 3 seconds or less. You want to think about that purchasing journey, so make sure that it's the fewest clicks possible. Search is going to be the number one used functionality on your website. Make sure it's good. And for those of you listening that are manufacturers, think about SKUs. They're going to search by SKUs. They're going to search by product descriptions. They're going to search by the VIN or the serial number or the job number, the thing that they know they're going to want to find information for. They may be having a legacy ERP part number because they have known your business for a long time, and they always remember that this is XYZ part number. Will give them the ability to cross-reference to that old legacy. Vendor component part numbers are really good cross-reference. So think about synonyms. I love to talk about a wheel, a tire, a spare. We call things different things. So people are going to go into your search box and they're going to search across. So think about your search functionality. Of course, high quality images and product information, but don't get bogged down in the beginning that every single product, I work with manufacturers that have over 1 million SKUs. But in reality, they don't sell 1 million SKUs every day, right? 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their product numbers. Focus on those that are turning on hand in your warehouse. Get those really clean, and then use your analytics from your website to help drive you to the next set of products that you should be focused on. Product availability. This one is key right now where supply is so constrained. People want transparency around product availability. Let them know if you have it in stock. If you don't have it in stock, tell them when they can expect it's coming. I have always said availability sells. It's not always about price. So don't leave your availability off your website. You need to have an easy checkout process. This one, you're going to work with vendors, and the reality is vendors have all of this ready for you, and they're going to be great advisors on this stuff. Make sure you have fast and reliable shipping. I know that when Brian talks about Amazon, this is one of the things I really love about Amazon is they have lots of choices, and it's very reliable, and they tell you because They select it by informing you it's a Prime one. So people expect that. Make sure you have competitive pricing. Gen Alpha has some partners. I'm sure Brian has partners that can help with competitive pricing if you need some help in that area. Make sure you have secure payment options, including the ability to pay on account for those that are registered with you. So if you already have users who pay on account with you, make sure that when they log in online, they can do that as well. And then, of course, order tracking and delivery updates. This is really that whole fulfillment piece. And then finally, mobile responsive. People want information on any browser, on any device, wherever they are. That's what's really critical. And again, vendors will help you get here. They have solutions that are designed to support you with this functionality. So, Brian.
Yeah. Well, let's,
back to you.
Kris, that's great stuff. Thank you for that. I'm going to spend a few minutes. We got about 15 minutes left in our webinar here. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about what role Amazon can play, and I'm going to go quickly through this because we're a bit short on time. But again, we'll be able. This is recorded, so you can always follow up with us later as well if you have questions. But it's Amazon is the #1 source of channel conflict for a lot of product manufacturers, and it doesn't have to be that way. But the first thing we have to recognize, and I love this book, Raise Your Virtual Hand if you've read it, Good to Great. I quote it in my book. What Jim Collins says in this book is realizing the great companies, they realize the brutal reality of their situation. And the brutal reality is in this world of e-commerce is that Amazon has become the dominant force. It has become a place not only for transactions, but also a place for product search. Here's some data that shows Amazon business product sales projected out. This came out last year from end of last year from eMarketer. Shows $66 billion in transactions by 2026. My goodness, enormous. One of the largest distributors, by the way, or dealers, however you want to sort of call a resale channel in B2B. This is like 4.5 times the size of Grainger. And it's not all copy paper. They have a huge selection in MRO, industrial, all different kinds of categories. They've become a distributor, make no mistake about it. But you have to understand where Amazon fits. And I know we have some folks from VSM. What's up, guys, on the call today. And I use some of your products here, guys. So thanks. Amazon plays best in scenarios where the customer knows exactly what they want. They need the product quickly and in small quantities. This has traditionally been known as tail spend, as many of you have probably heard. This is the stuff that's not planned in advance, right? And this plays perfectly in Amazon's strength as a search engine and a fulfillment company. There are 3 billion products on Amazon. It is a search engine, make no mistake about it. But Amazon now is investing in what's called planned spend. This is, the majority of spend in B2B is capital spend that's planned in advance. And many of you on the call today know this. You're out negotiating with folks around their spend that they're planning for the year, their capital spend or what have you. Amazon is working against that as well. But today, Amazon mostly is a tail spend. These are small quantities and they need it quickly. But does this mean, all the things you've been saying, does Amazon spell the end for traditional distribution and dealers? I was joking with Kris to say yes, and the webinar is over. No, the answer is no, not at all. Right. In fact, what I think it does is it really up levels what we're asking our distributors and dealers to do, right? So how I like to couch this, and Kris alluded to this earlier, is understand the value of your resale channels. And Kris shared a paradigm for, the path to purchase, journey mapping. Understand at each step here in the funnel, what does your dealer distributor do? And then understand what each does best. Distributors, OEMs, you call them dealers, distributors, other resellers, outside and inside Salesforce, e-commerce, other channels. Where do each of these play? And then identify trends, right? So I've worked with companies, manufacturers that have said, gosh, I'm going to manage down my traditional channel. I'm going to assume some of these folks are going to be out of business in 10 years per the Cisco guy. And I'm going to get into these e-commerce channels as a result, including Amazon, right? But you have to understand what value your resellers play. And then you can use primary research and ultimate buyer feedback. You as manufacturers need to know what your ultimate buyer wants and why they buy from the channels they're buying from, including Amazon. And then you can have a realistic sense for where you should invest and how you should go to market. When we develop an Amazon strategy for some of the clients, and a bunch of you are on the phone today, the first thing we're thinking about is this. We're thinking about what role does Amazon play? And then we're building the Amazon strategy within this. Now, we have to recognize, this data on the left here from Digital Commerce 360 a couple of years ago, which of the following marketplaces to use as a research or purchase products in B2B, Amazon Business, 72%. This is a change in buyer channel preferences, folks. This is the brutal reality. We do need to understand that Amazon now plays a role. And we believe that if your company differentiates on a product, as all of you do, this is simply a channel shift. This is not an existential threat. Amazon's private label business is tiny, okay? 2% of their sales. Everyone is worried about that. The press loves it. Fact of the matter is it's very small, but you should be controlling your brand and product on this channel. And there's multiple ways to tackle it. There's a misconception that you only have to sell everything on Amazon and go. It's not the case, but it can become a source of channel conflict. What are the common ways it becomes a source of channel conflict? Why is it the number one source? Well, often it comes from, and many of you are vendor central sellers on Amazon. When you sell to Amazon on a PO, you give them control of your price and a lot of other things like content and assortment, etc. When Amazon has control of your price, I believe in no BS here, folks. They're not going to honor your MAP policy. They're going to be violating your MAP. They're going to be generating lower prices on the channel. And so and they're going to say to you, hey, and they got a point, you got to control your own channel and your own resale and where everything else is happening. So, they are going to put it back on you. The fact of the matter is also that a lot of companies are dealing with unauthorized and opportunistic resellers, and they're the ones controlling what's happening on Amazon. That can also drive down your price and cause horrible presence on Amazon. This is counterintuitive. A proactive Amazon selling program for a manufacturer actually can reduce channel conflict rather than exacerbate it. Why? Because if you take the approach I'm going to suggest, you can control things like your price. So you have three options. And the first one, I think every branded manufacturer, anybody with a brand period, ought to be doing, which is controlling your brand on Amazon. Remember, Amazon is a search engine. Something called Amazon Brand Registry allows you to register your trademark brand and control your content on the channel. Then you can consider selling on Amazon, either using what's called 1P or 3P. I'll get into that in a moment. But this, again, can be the best way to actually mitigate channel conflict. You can also authorize a control, number one, plus leverage some of your existing resellers. We have a number of clients that will leverage traditional distribution or dealers to actually sell on their behalf on Amazon while also controlling the content and pricing on Amazon. So you have options, folks. And, again, for the sake of time, I'm going to go quickly through this. But you can see that, it's not all or nothing, and you can mix these approaches, by the way. So if you are to sell on Amazon, and if you're curious about the pros and cons, we can take it offline. I don't have it in here, but you have options here for vendor and seller central. These are two ways to sell your product on Amazon. The one on the left is vendor central, also called 1P or first party. You're selling to Amazon as you would a traditional wholesale channel. You ship to Amazon's fulfillment centers. Amazon ships to the end buyer. You have some merchandising and marketing possibilities or capabilities here, but you're essentially handing Amazon control of your price, of your content, of your inventory. On the right-hand side is something called Seller Central, 3P or third party. When I talk about managing channel conflict, this is the place that a lot of companies, manufacturers are leaning. This is where you set up your own store. Amazon still processes the order, but they never buy it from you. The manufacturer, either you ship it to the end customer once they place it, the order, or you use Amazon's fulfillment services called Fulfilled by Amazon or FBA to fulfill the order. You basically put the product on consignment with Amazon. You still have marketing and merchandising opportunities, but we see many B2B manufacturers, some of you guys know this firsthand because we're working with you on it, are moving in this direction because it gives you price and brand control and higher profitability. And it's the best way to mitigate channel conflict. So again, number one source, we need to get control of this. And when you do this right, Ron, you're here. Thank you for your quote. The Amazon 3P approach is a slam dunk and has helped us to communicate better with our distributors. It has helped us deepen our relationships. What? An Amazon program, Ron? Really? Yes. Your relationships with them and become more strategic. We should have done this 5 years ago. Well, there you go. Ron Viters, thank you for your quote. Dynabrade is a manufacturer of pneumatic tools, abrasives, tools, etc., and a longtime client of ours. So how do you gain control of all this? Well, and again, I know I'm flying through this, guys. We're going to get through our case studies real quick here because we're running low on time. But there's really a couple steps you can take. One is registering your brand. I put a link in here. Amazon will not take unauthorized sellers off of your product. Let me be clear, but this does help you control your content. We often work with our clients in building something called an authorized for Amazon program, which incorporates distribution policies, a minimum advertised price policy, a reseller agreement for authorized sellers, etc. There's some tricks of the trade about using your warranty. Again, I'm not going to get into this too much for time's sake, but you can leverage this authorized for Amazon program to move unauthorized or unwanted resellers off of your brand. There's a process for it. You have to monitor it, and it's not a perfect science. So at the end of the day, there's a whole series of things you have to do here, but the control, quote unquote, is possible on the channel, and I'm happy to talk to you about that offline. So I'm going to give a real quick case study, and then maybe you could do yours, Kris.
Yep.
Then we'll see if we have any time left for questions. I know Cody. I'm going to answer your question as it relates in this case study. So Grasshopper Lawnmower is a joint client of ours with Gen Alpha. They make these awesome zero-turn lawnmowers, commercial lawnmowers. And they started an Amazon program. Before they had any e-commerce really to speak of, they started on Amazon with us a few years ago with parts and accessories. And guess what? They got a multi-million dollar run rate within just a year. And their market was recapturing a lot of it from other aftermarket non-OEM parts. They were recapturing market share from these folks. And they did a study that showed 70% of their sales on Amazon were purely incremental. They were reaching customers that were outside of the reach of their traditional base of dealers, getting higher operating profits. And fascinating, Amazon's a search engine. The dealers that they have that had e-commerce reported lifts in their own e-commerce. And Cody, to your question, you asked, curious about managing channel territory with Amazon. This is Cody's question. Biggest hurdle for you? Well, guess what? When you use a 3P selling model, you can actually tell where the order's going. You can give credit to the dealer. You can give credit to your internal sales team on Amazon sales. That's right. You can offer commissions if you want to other channels on Amazon sales. So Grasshopper is a great example of a company that's aligned channels and used Amazon then to launch their own e-commerce. Kris, here's another company, Tyco. You want to talk about them?
Yeah, and I just love Grasshopper and love that they had some success on Amazon and then moving to their own digital commerce solution with us. It's such a great story with Tyco. So Tyco, they're a terminal tractor manufacturer here in North America. You see their vehicles at ports. Really, they have a fifth wheel on the back. It's moving trailers around all day long. And they wanted to modernize their business for their distribution channel, make it easy for distributors to buy from them and their owned operations, because they have their own operations that are maintaining vehicles and doing some service for ports as well. So we worked with them. And if we jump to the next slide, really what was important to them was to make sure that their dealers could search by the job order number that defined the unique tractor, the terminal tractor that they owned or they were operating, so that they could go in, look at the bills of materials, get access to pricing for parts. They could add all of the parts that they might need for a job. All of the maintenance instructions necessary are all there for them, and dealers can easily check out. So they really chose option 2, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, where they provide information to other end customers who might own these so that they can access information related to parts and service, but they protect their dealers by ensuring that the customer goes to the dealer direct to place the order. So that's how they started. 10 months after launch, 52% of all their parts orders were completed online. They reached
Incredible.
just over $1 million at that point in time. They had over 1,300 orders and 11,000 site visitors. Today, they've got much higher user adoption at 75%, and they're already looking at future, upgrades to their digital commerce by integrating telematics. They want to use the configurator for refurbishment programs. They're adding vendor breakdowns to their catalog. So they started in one place, and now they keep addressing the needs of their distribution network, their owned operations, to make it really efficient. And what's interesting about them is that they've been growing their installed base, right? So they've been selling new tractors out to the market. The tractors are getting older, which means they need more maintenance. What they haven't had to do is add additional parts personnel. So this is how they were able to scale. The digital commerce site is providing all of that information, and the team is ensuring that the digital commerce platform has everything that people need. So
Awesome.
I know we finished quickly here at the end, but
one thing I want to share before we wrap up, Kris, we did survey this is really interesting. We asked a question on LinkedIn: are manufacturers selling via e-commerce and Amazon disintermediated traditional resale channels? Check this out. 67, almost 70% said no. Their direct e-com is incremental. So guys, we're not telling stories here. These are people that are in the business that are responding to these questions that we just showed you 2 case studies. This is real, and it's something that y'all need to pay attention to. I know we're up on time, so we'll have this recording available to you. We have a couple points on where to start here. We don't have time to cover it, but thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your questions. We got a whole bunch. Kris, any final words before we wrap up?
It's important to get started. Let's not be left behind. We wanted to light a little fire today. I hope we did. People are getting started with these solutions in all various fashions. The important thing is to get started. Don't leave yourself with just the traditional channel. It's not going to be good enough in the future. So thanks, Brian. This was a pleasure.
Thank you, Kris.
Thanks to everyone who joined us today, and we'll be in touch soon.
Good luck out there. Thank you, everyone.